Discuss something about just in general, but just a heads up on some things. A lot of people talk about investing in silver coin, right, as part of your portfolio, but they don't really talk about it for retirement per se, because it doesn't really give you interest, right? It doesn't have like, yeah, if I got a pile of silver coin someplace, is it going to give me some kind of interest on my money? You hope that the value would go up. But I just want to put something out here, and it's like the information. Well, let me put it this way: the information I've seen is not. I don't put like full faith in it. But at the other side of the coin, or that's whatever you want to put it, that it's, in other words, it's something that is very plausible, and it makes a lot of common sense. And that is, a lot of people are kind of like when you're retired, if you're expecting basically income from the government, from Social Security, or from pensions. And actually the way the pensions are, if this is what I've read anyway, that the forecast for like pension payments and what's actually the dollars that are in the pensions means that they have to have at least a 10% return every year. And I'm like, that may not be, because where a lot of pensions may go bust is when you're looking at the outlook for the stock market, the bonds, and the corporate bonds and the government bonds, the returns on such for the next decade at least, it looks like the average might be about a 2% return versus the 10% return that's required. So a lot of people look at silver's like one of the things that's actually, per the book Classic Thought, silver coins is one of the things that you don't want to put a lot of money in for retirement, maybe just a tiny bit. But in this day and age, it may be something to put a significant amount. I don't want to say exactly how much is significant, maybe like 20%, and not 100%, but a hell of a lot higher percentage than what is typically thought of as wise to do. Normally you would say 2% or 1%, but it probably should be at least 20% into precious metals in today's day and age for retirement, because I don't see, just as a simple logic. Now, so it's not going to happen to everybody across the board, but they have to keep up these stellar returns on pensions in order to make the payout for what's expected in the future. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it. And the reason I'm saying that is just that what all these different studies that are put out, and I'm talking about mainstream studies, not talking about conspiracy studies or anything like that, where they're constantly saying the sky is going to fall. But since the PE ratios are one of the highest, the price earnings ratio on equities have been one of the highest they've ever been. Earnings have been extremely high. Also in corporate earnings, the outlook, and also the debt is obviously at record highs for the U.S. government. The outlook for returns on investments in corporate bonds, government bonds, and equities is, in a lot of cases, and some people have even said, it's the worst outlook since 1948. Basically, it's classic. It's the classic pattern. It's not the sky's going to fall. It's just the classic pattern. In other words, the average return on these type of investments over the next 10 years might be 2%, but what's actually money-wise in the pensions, they need about a 10% return. So that's going to tell you there's going to be some major problems. Now, something else that's coming up, and I've seen this on emails that were passed to me and different things, not in YouTube emails, but other emails. Obama was talking about changing the capital gains tax up to 28%, and all this kind of garbage. Actually, a lot of this stuff isn't changed. And there's short-term capital gains tax rates, long-term capital gains tax rates. There's capital gains tax rates depending on what type of asset it is. There's capital gains tax rates depending on what your tax bracket is. It's not that simple. There isn't just one capital gains tax rate out there. But nothing, is changing right away. I just got to point that out. But I do expect, though, if gold and silver move up a hell of a lot, it's probably going to be taxed with extreme capital gains taxes if there's a financial crisis, a currency crisis. Now, the advantage to this is, and this is where I always say gold and silver, well, actually silver, I'm not too much on gold because it's not, when it goes up to $5,000 an ounce, or let's say $3,000 an ounce. I know Peter Schiff was talking about $5,000 an ounce, but that's a hell of a jump. But let's say even $2,500 to $3,000 an ounce. It's going to be highly taxed, but the problem is, if you want to try to use it for exchange of something, where you're using it almost like cash, for instance, in other words, you're making a cash transaction based upon the value of gold at $3,000 an ounce and the value of silver at $75 an ounce or something like that. Well, that's just as good as the principle of Bitcoin, except even better. Because it's an in-person thing. Nobody sees it anywhere on the internet. I know that's your digital wallet and everything like that, but I actually have to state a little bit more about this Bitcoin deal because I've had red flags going off on this damn thing from day one, even though that would have been a smart thing to invest in when it first came out. But what I think is going on with it is actually, nobody really knows where it came from. I think it was devised by the government itself. I do. And the reason I'm saying that now is because Al Gore is behind it. And Al Gore is like rah-rahing it, hoorahing it on. You get certain members of the Federal Reserve are hoorahing it on and saying it's the wave of the future. So in other words, the best way to get to something started is to make people think it's the in thing to do that's anti-government and making you free, but actually it's not. Going back to square one, silver is really the thing to do. That's the thing to do, because there's nothing on a computer anywhere, nowhere. For instance, if you need to trade it for, I don't know what person could trade, like what type of goods you were going to trade it for, but say you wanted to, you'd have to be dealing with not one of the big box stores, but say you wanted, you dealt with a vendor and you wanted all new furniture. And instead of going into one of the typical stores that sell furniture, you go to like a person that's a craftsperson that rebuilds old furniture better than new with better materials, and it's actually something far exceeding the quality of anything out that's manufactured today and imported from China or whatever the hell it is, and you decide to deal with that person directly in the form of silver. In that case, that's like a Bitcoin transaction, correct? Basically, that was the whole beauty behind Bitcoin. Basically, that you wanted to use this transaction, that it was incognito, nobody knew about it, and all this kind of garbage. You see, this is where I'm saying silver is far better than that. The government really isn't for silver, and that's really why the price of silver is being suppressed. But I have to state this: I don't think it's going to stay suppressed. And when it moves up, the sharks are going to actually move it up farther than what it should be. That's what's going to be the difficult part to figure out, because I expected, long range silver to be a lot higher than it is. But when it gets to the plateau where it's going to be, maybe over maybe $130 an ounce, it may greatly exceed that, and then crash down and level off. What always typically happens is, even though the sharks move things up and they move things down, they make money off of the movement, not so much the actual dollar rated value of something. It's actually which direction, and knowing which direction something's going to go in. But the thing is, silver actually is the only thing out there that is the incognito investment or method of trade. And considering what's going to happen with the pensions, it's almost like an arithmetic formula. It's like you cannot it's impossible from what the outlook is today and what the pensions and where they're being invested in and the broad equities and all this type of stuff, how they're going to get a return of 10% on the money for the next so many years when the outlook for return is actually dismal from this point forward. And this is not something, like I said, that's being that's a presentation that's put out by the alternative people that are always forecasting doom and gloom for the United States and things like that. But it's actually something that is mainstream. It's just a typical cycle of events. Now, something else that's coming up, I think we're actually going into, eventually we're going to probably go into some type of hot war, where it's, because like right now I could say that the Cold War is already reformed with Russia over to Ukraine. This may all be planned. That's what I'm thinking. I'm actually, to tell you the truth, I've read too much about history to not realize that pretty much everything that comes about is not come about due to like haphazard events. There's a long range plan. There's a long range plan, and it may actually begin to create some tumultuous times in the United States to give an excuse to have a crackdown too. I don't know. I really don't know what the angle is going to be, and I don't think anybody does. But it's pretty obvious that the situation, it's just a matter of time before there's an actual hot war in Ukraine. It's a guarantee. The situation is, I see where it can't last that long is because, somebody gave me that article on the Crimea and the water situation. They have irrigation. Crimea had a lot of irrigation coming from the mainland Ukraine, and that's all been cut off. Now, in the case of the pipelines going across to Ukraine and them worrying about pipelines, the Russians worrying about pipelines, that situation could stay on for maybe at least a couple of years. But in the situation of crops and the vital economy of the Crimea continuing, with the water supply being cut off to billions of dollars of agriculture, it's a guarantee that Russia is going to have to do something. Actually, I know there's a lot of propaganda both sides about what's going on in the eastern Ukraine, but you have to be an idiot not to know that Putin doesn't have his people in there. I know some of the photos that they showed of Spetsnaz and Special Forces Russia as being proof that they're in eastern Ukraine are probably BS. But as far as the basic premise that Russia has their troops over in eastern Ukraine, that's a no-brainer. I mean, unfortunately, the major media seems to, if they don't have the proof, they make up the proof, even though that is a correct premise. It is a correct premise. And it's over economics, because if they lose, in other words, Russia is not going to lose out, and cannot afford to lose out in this area, period. And, actually my opinion is Ukraine ought to be 100% independent. But, neither with the EU and neither with Russia. Just independent Ukraine all the way. That's the way I look at it. I'm against both sides, to tell you the truth. But I have to tell you that this situation in Ukraine is going to be very bullish for the metals. And it's also going to be bullish for oil. Now, I know, oil is not going to go up forever due to, let me put it this way, they're running out of oil on the earth. But it always seems like if there's some kind of interruption in supply, because I highly suspect, that when something does happen serious in Ukraine, that the U.S. and Israel is going to attack Syria, and if Syria bowls over pretty fast, they're going to go for Iran. And then there's going to be a major spike up with oil prices. But even be that as it may, they'll come back down. And there's an ace in the works as far as the global supply of oil and the global energy consumption too. There's an ace in the works, and the ace in the works is this. There's actually a greater and greater efficiency in producing electricity with available natural gas and oil and coal or whatever they're using with the technology. In other words, they found far more efficient ways to produce more electricity with less supposed fossil fuel, quote unquote, whether it is fossil fuel or not. And so ergo, that's going to be one of the main reasons why the Earth is not going to run out of oil. We may go to more electrical energy. It may come partly from the sun. It may come partly from other methods. It may come from traditional methods where we produce electricity with engines. But those methods are going to be far more efficient. And as a side note, actually with Iran, you know, the amount of electricity that they're supposedly gaining from their nuclear program, which, you know, they claim is strictly for electricity, they would actually gain a much greater, by many times, amount of electrical savings just by improving their electrical infrastructure, which is highly inefficient. You know, so, you know, we know the game with them. But anyway, all these tensions are going to lead to basically more crackdowns in the United States on our freedoms too. So, you know, it's a bad game all the way around, man. I know it. But, you know, I'm really kind of shooting from the hip a little bit on some of this. But, you know, I know a lot of people were pissed. Well, some people were. Some people were totally pissed off at me about the Bitcoin deal, saying, because I thought it was from the government, you know, and I didn't trust it when it got up into bubble mode. But now the charade is totally off with you know, Al Gore basically saying it's a great thing. There's people in the Federal Reserve touting it now that it's going to be the wave of the future. Yeah, it's from the government, definitely, definitely. So, you know, people that jump aboard that, you know, you're going to find out it's not what it actually was designed for, what you really think it was all about from the beginning. Actually, silver is. So, you know, if you're somebody that is, you know, I can tell you right now, I know where they're going to probably hit the middle class the hardest. Because if you look at people that are over 65, that is where most of the wealth of the nation is. You know, like that's the strongest of the middle class wealth. And they're also the people that are like a burden. You know, this is what the government's thinking. And, you know, other elitists, they're thinking that they're the ones that are a burden on the system. As far as, you know, in other words, the elitists think of people as human resources, right? Now, that's really the game. I think they're going after their wealth the most, the 65 and over. And also, you know, if something happens catastrophic in our system where, you know, the healthcare system collapses or something due to like an economic problem, a lot of these older people would just die off. And, you know, without the medicines that they're totally dependent upon and all this type of stuff. And, you know, that may just very well be in the plan of the elite. That very well may be. So, you know, I put out a lot of stuff about some alternative medicine. Now, I don't know how super effective it is, to tell you the truth. It may be somewhat helpful for the price. That's what I'm looking at it that way. But the game is the last target. And, you know, these people, actually, a lot of these people that are retired, you know, they're in la-la land a lot of times with a lot of this stuff. I mean, they know there's problems, but, you know, a lot of these people spend more time on the golf course than they would ever trying to correct a situation or, you know, be independent in a true sense. You know, it's more like, oh, what can they do about it? And they don't give a damn too much, you know. They'll complain about it, but they don't do much about it. So, you know, that's, if something happens to this way, that it may, you know, it's kind of their own fault that they don't use something to protect themselves. But, you know, my message would be for people that are thinking about, you know, they're in retired or whatever it is, I would be collecting, I would be storing away some of the silver coins, because I do expect the warnings of Alan Greenspan. I know the guys, like, you know, you can't trust them all the way, but sometimes they do reveal certain things that are correct. Alan Greenspan has warned about hyperinflation, and I do expect that this market run-up in the equities, I know it did fine today. You know, the equities were doing fine except for the NASDAQ. The Dow was doing fine, and the metals were pulling back today. But there will be a pullback across the board of maybe 30–40%. And when that happens, they're going to go inject all kinds of money into the system. And a lot of that money, I think, is going to find its way into the metals. And you'll see them go up. You'll see them go up. Actually, the metals right now are going to protect you. You know, the thing is, they don't go up in a straight line. Like inflation goes up 3%, the metals go up 3%. It doesn't work like that. But there's going to be a time where the metals are going to far exceed the cost of inflation. And like I said, they have all the advantages of Bitcoin in that it's like cash. It is like cash. And you know, when you're dealing with true vendors, true entrepreneur, people that are, you know, working on their own. Like, in other words, you're not going to be able to take silver and go into your big box stores and stuff like that. But by and large, any of the middle class people that are tradespeople that you can possibly buy goods from, you will be able to exchange silver for that. And it may go to a, you know, much higher price than it is right now. And that could save you quite a bit of money financially, and it has, which in itself has a big advantage over Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I do not trust at all because, like I said, Al Gore is for Bitcoin. Al Gore is praising the merits of Bitcoin. You know, it's like the Federal Reserve. Some of the people in the Federal Reserve are now praising the merits of Bitcoin. What is that telling you? What is that telling you? You know, it's amazing. They have no clue who actually developed Bitcoin, right? They have no clue who this guy is, right? Does that sound ludicrous? To me, it does. You know, considering that Bitcoin was supposedly the thing that they're using for drugs and stuff like this. Well, you know, we all know this, too, you know, with the drug industry and everything like that. And, you know, the biggest guys that don't get caught, and the biggest wheeler and dealers in illicit traffic of drugs is usually the big banks, it's the government itself, it's the intelligence agencies, it's, you know, it's the people, you know, it's the watchers, basically who watches the watchers, right? So, you know, the fact that Bitcoin was being used in drugs doesn't really mean that it's not endorsed by the establishment and hasn't been created by the establishment in the first place, you know? Thing is, like, silver is for freaking honest people. And if you got honest money and you work hard for it and you put your money into silver, not all of it, but a good sizable amount, it's actually going to wind up being one of your best protections because it's a process of elimination. You're not going to be able to depend upon the government, and you're not going to be able to depend upon pension funds. So if you want to say, and you're not going to be able to depend on fiat paper currency forever either, too, because the dollar is going to get, you know, maybe not eliminated, but it's going to get devalued. You will be able to depend upon silver, even though it has been a bad investment for the last 3 years. On the overall scheme of things, it's just an outstanding investment. So, you know, you got to look at the big picture.